Imagine a fog-choked village where the sea whispers of ancient curses, and a stolen relic, the Star of Murren, holds the key to a deadly secret. Hercule Poirot steps into St. Murren's Vale, summoned by a chilling, anonymous letter promising murder. At a glittering gala, a lord is found dead in a locked room, a cryptic note in his cane. The star sees all. Why was he killed? What power does the star hold? As bodies pile up, poisoned by glowing champagne, slashed in a ticking clock, drowned with a star-etched pearl pro, unravels a web of smuggling, betrayal, and a mastermind hiding behind a mask. Can he outwit a killer who uses legends as a weapon, or will the siren's lullaby claim him next? Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Fog. The fog rolled in from the sea like a living thing, curling its ghostly fingers around the cobblestone streets of St. Murren's Vale. Hercule Poirot adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat, his gloved hand gripping a silver-tipped cane as he stepped off the rattling train onto the platform. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of salt and secrets. A letter, penned in spidery ink and slipped into his London flat 3 days prior, had summoned him to this remote Cornish village. It bore no signature, only a cryptic promise. A murder waits in the shadows. Come to St. Murren's Vale before the gala ends. Poirot's moustache twitched as he surveyed the station, deserted save for a lone porter who eyed him warily before vanishing into the mist. The little Belgian detective, known for his fastidious nature and unparalleled mind, was no stranger to anonymous summons. Yet this one prickled his curiosity. The mention of a gala, the lack of a sender, and the ominous tone it was, as he might say, Ters, inte, acute res sant. The village emerged from the fog as he walked, its quaint cottages huddled like conspirators under slate roofs. Gas lamps flickered, casting pools of amber light that barely pierced the gloom. Poirot's polished shoes clicked against the stones, a metronome to his thoughts. The letter had spoken of the Star of Murren, a fabled artifact stolen from the village museum a month ago. Legend claimed it was no mere gem but a relic of ancient power, its origins shrouded in tales of shipwrecks and forgotten rituals. Poirot, ever the rationalist, dismissed such nonsense, but he could not ignore the timing, the theft, the letter, and now a gala hosted by Lord Reginald Ashby, the village's wealthiest resident. The Ashby estate loomed ahead, a Georgian manor, perched on a cliff overlooking the churning sea. Its windows glowed like the eyes of a beast, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses spilled into the night. Poirot presented his invitation, forged, of course, by his own meticulous hand too. The footman at the door, the man clad in livery that seemed a size too large, barely glanced at it before ushering him inside. The grand hall was a riot of colour and sound. Chandeliers dripped with crystal, reflecting the swirl of satin gowns and black tailcoats. A string quartet played a lively waltz, and guests moved in a choreographed dance of wealth and pretense. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the room, cataloguing faces. A flushed young woman in emerald silk, giggling behind a fan. A dear man with a monocle, clutching a cane much like Poirot's own, and a willowy figure in a crimson shawl, her gaze darting nervously toward the host. Lord Reginald Ashby stood at the centre of it all, a bear of a man with a booming laugh and a glass of port in hand. His florid cheeks and silver hair gave him the air of a jovial king, but Poirot noted the tightness in his smile, the way his fingers gripped the glass a fraction too hard. Ashby was a man under strain, and Poirot's little grey cells hummed with anticipation. Welcome, welcome." Ashby's voice cut through the chatter as he spotted Poirot. "And who might you be, my fine fellow? I don't recall inviting a gentleman with such a splendid moustache." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes gleaming. "Hercule Poirot, at your service, monseigneur. I am a visitor to your charming village, drawn by the reputation of your hospitality." Ashby's laugh was a touch too loud. "Well, you've chosen a grand night for it. The gala marks the harvest moon, and we've spared no expense. Come, have some. Champagne our own vintage, pressed from vines older than the cliffs themselves." Poirot accepted a flute, though he had no intention of drinking. He preferred his tisane, but appearances must be maintained. As Ashby turned to greet another guest, Poirot slipped into the crowd, his ears attuned to the undercurrents of conversation. Snippets drifted to him, whispers of the star's theft, rumors of a curse, and mutterings about Ashby's recent obsession with ancient relics. One elderly woman, her pearls gleaming like tiny moons, leaned toward her companion and hissed, "He's been digging in places he shouldn't. That star belongs to the sea, not his vault." Poirot's interest sharpened. He approached a quiet corner where a young man in a tweed suit stood alone, nervously twisting a signet ring. The man's eyes flicked toward Ashby, then away, as if afraid of being caught staring. "Pardonnez-moi," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "You seem preoccupied, monsieur. May I inquire your name?" The man started, then recovered with a weak smile. "Edmund Vane, sir. Just taking in the evening. Lord Ashby throws quite the affair." "Indeed," Poirot said, tilting his head. "And yet you do not dance. You watch, you observe, much like myself. Perhaps you have heard of this star of Marin. Its absence seems to weigh heavily on the village." Vane's fingers froze on the ring. "It's just a story," he said quickly. "A shiny trinket, nothing more. People love their legends. But legends often hide truths," Poirot replied, his gaze piercing. "And truths, they can be dangerous. N'est-ce pas?" Before Vane could respond, a scream tore through the hall. The music faltered, and the crowd parted like a tide. Poirot's heart quickened as he followed the commotion to a heavy oak door at the far end of the room. It led to Ashby's private study, and the footman was pounding on it, his face pale. "It's locked," the footman shouted. "Lord Ashby went in there not 10 minutes ago, and now he won't answer." Poirot pushed forward, his small stature belying his authority. "Stand aside," he commanded. "Break the door if you must." With a collective heave, 2 burly guests rammed the door, splintering the lock. The room beyond was dimly lit, a fire crackling in the hearth. Lord Reginald Ashby lay sprawled across his desk, his eyes wide open, his face frozen in a grotesque grin. A trickle of blood ran from his temple, pooling on the mahogany. The window was shut, the room sealed tight, no way in or out but the door, which had been locked from the inside. The crowd gasped, some turning away, others pressing closer. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the wound. A single blow, precise and brutal, delivered by something heavy. His eyes scanned the desk. Papers, a crystal decanter, a silver letter opener, nothing obvious, nothing out of place. But then his gaze fell on Ashby's cane, propped against the chair. It was identical to the one Poirot carried down to the Silvertip curio, he murmured, lifting the cane. With a deft twist, he uncovered a hidden compartment within the handle. A folded scrap of paper slipped out, its edges yellowed. Inked in a trembling hand were the words, "The star sees all." The room buzzed with panic, but Poirot's mind was a calm oasis. He turned to the footman, who saw Lord Ashby enter this room. "Just me, sir," the footman stammered. He said he needed a moment alone to check something. He locked the door himself, and the key, Poirot asked. The footman pointed to the desk, where a brass key gleamed beside the decanter. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A locked room, a dead man, and a cryptic note. The puzzle was deliciously complex. He addressed the crowd, his voice steady. "Madame et messieurs, remain calm. A crime has been committed, but Hercule Poirot is here. The truth it will not hide from me." As the guests whispered and wept, Poirot's gaze returned to the note. "The star sees all." Was it a warning, a confession, or something else entirely? He thought of the fog outside, the whispers of curses, and the nervous young man in tweed. Edmund Vane had slipped away during the chaos, his absence as conspicuous as the cane in Poirot's hand. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like spectres. Poirot straightened, his moustache curving with determination. The gala was over, but the game had just begun. He would unravel this mystery, piece by meticulous piece, until the star of Murren's secrets lay bare. For now the chapter closed, with a promise. No locked door, no hidden note, no fog could shield the truth from Hercule Poirot. Chapter 2. The Masquerade of Motives. The fog clung to St. Murren's Vale like a jealous lover, muffling the village as Hercule Poirot stood in the shadowed parlour of the Ashby estate. The previous night's gala had ended in chaos, with Lord Reginald Ashby's body carried away under a sheet, his frozen grin haunting the guests. Poirot's mind churned, the cryptic note "The star sees all" etched in his thoughts. The locked room, the hidden compartment in Ashby's cane, and the whispers of the stolen star of Murren formed a puzzle that demanded his little grey cell's full attention. Lady Celeste Ashby, the widow, had announced a masquerade ball for the following evening, a bold move that stirred the village's gossip. Some called it tasteless, others a tribute to her late husband's love of spectacle. Poirot saw it as an opportunity. A killer was among them, and a masked gathering was the perfect stage for secrets to slip. The manor's ballroom was transformed by dusk, its chandeliers dimmed to a golden haze, mirrors reflecting a kaleidoscope of masked figures. Poirot, clad in a sleek black domino mask and a tailored evening suit, blended into the crowd. His cane tapped lightly against the polished floor, a rhythm to his observations. The guests swirled in a waltz, their costumes a riot of feathers, velvet, and glittering jewels. A woman in a peacock mask laughed too shrilly. A man in a harlequin's motley whispered to a cloaked figure. Suspicion hung heavier than the fog outside. Poirot's eyes locked on Lady Celeste, resplendent in a silver gown that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her mask, adorned with delicate filigree, did little to hide the composure in her gazer. Composure that struck Poirot as unnatural for a grieving widow. She glided through the crowd, dispensing smiles like coins, but her hands betrayed a faint tremor when she greeted a guest. "Madame," Poirot said, approaching with a bow, "your resilience is remarkable. To host such an event so soon after tragedy, it is, perhaps, a testament to your strength." Celeste's lips curved, though her eyes remained cool. Reginald loved life, Monsieur Poirot. He would have wanted joy to prevail, not sorrow. Besides, the village needs distraction. Don't you agree? Distraction is a powerful thing, Poirot replied, his tone light but probing. Yet it can also mask truth. Tell me, did your husband speak of the star of Meran before his misfortune? Her fingers tightened on her fan. He was fascinated by it, like many here. A silly obsession, nothing more. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must attend to my guests. She swept away, leaving Poirot to ponder her evasion. He turned his attention to the others. Edmund Vane, the nervous young man from the gala, was present, his fox masks failing to hide his furtive glances. Nearby, a woman in a crimson velvet mask, Miss Clara Thorne, the museum curator, hovered near a table laden with champagne flutes. Her hands shook as she adjusted her shawl, and Poirot noted her eyes darting toward a maid serving drinks. A girl with a plain mask, but an oddly graceful posture. The quartet struck up a new tune, and the crowd shifted. Poirot positioned himself near a marble pillar where he could observe without being conspicuous. Vane approached Clara, his voice low but audible to Poirot's keen ears. "You've been careless," Vane hissed. He knew too much, and now look what's happened. Clara's mask tilted, her voice sharp. "Don't you dare pin this on me, Edmund. You're in as deep as anyone." Their words were cut short as a piercing cry rang out. The music halted, and all eyes turned to a man in a gold lion mask, staggering in the center of the ballroom. His champagne flute slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. The liquid inside glowed faintly, an eerie green shimmer under the chandelier's light. He clutched his throat, gasped, and collapsed, his mask slipping to reveal the ashen face of Mr. Lionel Grey, a local merchant known for his dealings with Ashby. Panic erupted. But Poirot was already moving, his small frame weaving through the crowd. He knelt beside Grey, noting the acrid scent rising from the spilled champagne. The man's eyes were wide, his lips tinged bluer, clear sign of poison. Poirot's gloved hand retrieved a shard of the broken flute, the glowing residue clinging to its edge. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his mind racing. "A poison that glows. This is no ordinary crime." He called for the footman, who confirmed that the champagne had come from a special reserve, poured only for select guests. Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing on the maid, who had frozen, her tray trembling. Before he could approach her, she slipped through a side door, vanishing into the manor's labyrinthian halls. Poirot turned to the crowd, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Mesdames et messieurs, remain where you are. A second murder has stained this house, and the killer is among us. Hercule Poirot will not allow such audacity to go unpunished." He beckoned to the butler, a stern man named Hargreaves, and instructed him to seal the exits. Then, with deliberate calm, Poirot examined the scene. The glowing champagne was a clue unlike any he had encountered. He recalled a treatise on bioluminescent algae, rare and toxic, harvested from deep-sea caves. Could this be linked to the star of Meran, rumored to pulse with an otherworldly light? His investigation led him to the serving table, where a single bottle of the reserve champagne stood, its label marked with a faint star emblem. Poirot's moustache twitched. "C'est magnifique," he whispered. The bottle was half empty, but no other guest showed signs of poisoning. The killer had targeted Grey specifically, and the method was as theatrical as it was deadly. Poirot questioned Clara Thorne next, cornering her near a velvet curtain. Her crimson mask was askew, her hands twisting the shawl into knots. "Miss Thorne," he said, his tone gentle but unyielding. "You knew Mr. Grey, n'est-ce pas?" And perhaps you know why his drink glowed like the sea at midnight. Clara's breath hitched. I don't know anything about that. Lionel was a colleague. We worked with Lord Ashby on acquisitions for the museum. That's all. And the star of Hercule Poirot pressed. Was it part of these acquisitions? Her eyes widened behind the mask. It was stolen before we could study it properly. Reginald was obsessed, said it held secrets. I thought he was mad. Poirot nodded, letting her go for now. Her fear was genuine, but her words were too careful. He sought out Vane, who was attempting to blend into a group near the fireplace. The young man's fox mask was tilted, revealing a sheen of sweat on his brow. Monsieur Vane, Poirot said, his voice low. You spoke of carelessness earlier. Carelessness with what, I wonder? A relic, a secret, or perhaps a poison? Vane's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just here for the ball. Nan, Poirot said, wagging a finger. You are here for something else, and Hercule Poirot will discover what. As the night wound down, the guests were ushered out under Hargreaves' watchful eye. Poirot lingered, his mind piecing together the fragments. Ashby's locked room death, the glowing poison, the star emblem on the bottle. The maid's disappearance nagged at him. She was a thread he must pull. And then there was Lady Celeste, her calm a facade that hid something deeper. He stepped onto the balcony, the fog curling around him like a living thing. The sea roared below, its rhythm a counterpoint to his thoughts. The star of Marennes was at the heart of this, he was certain, but its role was still obscured. The killer had struck twice, each murder bold and precise, yet the motive remained elusive. Poirot's cane tapped against the stone balustrade. The game, it grows more intricate, he mused. But Hercule Poirot is not deterred. The truth, it waits to be unmasked. The chapter closed with the detective returning to the ballroom, where the shattered flute still lay, its glow fading like a dying star. The masquerade had ended, but the dance of deception was far from over. Chapter 3. The clockmaker's secret. The fog over St. Maurice Vale had thinned by morning, revealing a sky bruised with clouds. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the damp, navigated the village's narrow lanes toward the shop of Elias Vaughan, the reclusive clockmaker. The events of the masquerade, Bull Lionel Grey's glowing poison, and the maid's sudden disappearance had sharpened Poirot's focus. The Star of Marennes, with its whispered legends of ancient power, was no mere trinket. The cryptic note from Lord Ashby's cane, "The star sees all," echoed in his mind, as did the star emblem on the poisoned champagne bottle. Each clue pointed to a deeper conspiracy, and Vaughan, rumoured to have quarrelled with Ashby over the relic, was the next piece of the puzzle. The clockmaker's shop stood at the edge of the village, a squat building with a crooked sign reading Vaughan's Time Works. Its windows were grimy, the air inside heavy with the scent of oil and metal. Clocks of every kind crowded the space, grandfather clocks with pendulums swaying like metronomes, pocket watches gleaming in glass cases, and bizarre contraptions that ticked in erratic rhythms. Poirot's polished shoes clicked on the wooden floor. A counterpoint to the cacophony of ticking. Elias Vaughan emerged from a back room. His wiry frame stooped, his eyes sharp behind thick spectacles. His hands, stained with grease, clutched a gear as if it were a talisman. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice like the creak of an old hinge. "I don't take walk-ins." "Hercule Poirot," Monsieur Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "I am a detective, come to discuss matters of time." And perhaps of stars. Vaughan's eyes narrowed, but he gestured to a stool. Sit, if you must. I've no patience for riddles. Poirot perched delicately, his cane resting across his knees. Then let us speak plainly. Lord Ashby, a man of your acquaintance, is dead. So is Lionel Grey. Both deaths, they are connected to the star of Murren, a relic you know well, Ness's C.E. Par. Vaughan's fingers tightened on the gear. Ashby was a fool, poking into things best left buried. That star's nothing but trouble. Cursed, they say, and I'm inclined to agree, said Curio. Poirot said, his moustache twitching. You speak of curses, yet I suspect you know more practical secrets. Ashby visited you often, did he not, to discuss devices? Vaughan snorted. He wanted my help with some nonsense about the star powering a machine, said it could see the future. Mad talk. I told him to leave it be, but he wouldn't listen. Poirot's gaze swept the shop, landing on a peculiar clock in the corner. Its face was etched with celestial symbol stars, moons, comet sand. Its hands were frozen at an odd angle. And this, he asked, pointing. A creation of yours. Vaughan stiffened. Just a trinket doesn't work. Nan, Poirot said softly. It works too well, I think. He stepped closer, noting a faint seam in the clock's base. Before Vaughan could protest, Poirot pressed it, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a tiny vial of luminescent liquid, its glow matching the poisoned champagne. Vaughan lunged forward, but Poirot was quicker, stepping back with the vial in his gloved hand. Careful, monsieur. This is evidence, and Hercule Poirot does not take kindly to interference. You've no right, Vaughan snapped, his face flushed. That's mine, for experiments. Experiments in murder, perhaps. Poirot's voice was calm but cutting. We shall see. Their confrontation was interrupted by a low, ominous chime from the shop's largest clock. A towering monstrosity with gears exposed like the innards of a beast. Poirot's eyes flicked to it, and he froze. A figure slumped inside the glass casing, blood pooling beneath the pendulum. It was Clara Thorne, the museum curator, her crimson shawl tangled in the gears, her face pale in death. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, his heart quickening. He approached, noting a gash across her throat, precise and deep. The clock's hands were stopped at 3:17, an impossible time for a device meant to run perpetually. Poirot's fingers traced the casing, finding a hidden panel. With a click, it opened, revealing a spring-loaded blade, its edge stained red. Vaughan stood rooted, his mouth agape. I didn't know. She was here earlier, asking about the star, but I sent her away. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet she returned, monsieur, and met her end in your clock. A coincidence? I think not. He examined the scene, his mind cataloguing details. The blade's mechanism, the stopped hands, the faint glow of algae residue on Clara's sleeve. The killer had struck again, using Vaughan's shop as a stage. But why Clara, and why this theatrical method? Poirot turned to Vaughan, who was now trembling. Tell me, monsieur, what did Miss Thorne want? The truth, if you please. Vaughan sank onto a stool, his defiance crumbling. She was obsessed with the star, like Ashby. Said it was tied to a smuggling ring, something about coded signals. I told her I wanted no part of it. My clocks are my life, not some cursed relic. Smuggling, Poirot mused, his little grey cells humming. And where might one find records of such activities? Vaughan hesitated, then pointed to a cluttered desk. My ledger. I keep track of clients, repairs, everything. Poirot rifled through the pages, his fingers pausing on a cryptic entry: Starshipment, Midnight, Cave. Beside it was a list of names, including Ashby, Gray, and Clara. Another name caught his eye. Lady Ashby, perhaps. The ledger hinted at a network, but its details were maddeningly vague. A commotion outside broke his focus. The village constable, a ruddy-faced man named Brant, burst in, his eyes wide. "Monsieur Poirot, we've found the maid Lilla, the one from the ball. She's hiding in the church, says she's terrified for her life." Poirot's moustache curved. "Excellent. She will speak, and Hercule Poirot will listen." He left Vaughan under Brant's watch, the vial and ledger secured in his coat. The church was a short walk, its spire piercing the clouds like a needle. Inside, Leela huddled in a pew, her plain mask discarded, her face streaked with tears. She was young, barely 20, with eyes that held too much fear for her years. "Mademoiselle Poirot," said gently, sitting beside her, "you ran from the ball." "Why?" Leela's voice trembled. "I saw it, sir. The champagne, it glowed, and I knew it was wrong. I poured it for Mr. Gray, but I didn't know it was poisoned. Someone switched the bottles, I swear." Who? Poirot pressed, his gaze steady. "I don't know," she cried. "But I heard them talking Clara and Edmund Vane in the hall before the ball. They mentioned the star, said it was dangerous to keep it hidden. I was afraid they'd see me, so I ran." Poirot nodded, his mind weaving connections. Leela's fear was genuine, but her role was unclear. Was she a witness or a pawn? He thanked her and instructed Brant to keep her safe, then stepped into the churchyard, where the sea's roar mingled with the wind. The clockmaker's shop, the glowing poison, the blade in the clockle pointed to a killer who delighted in complexity. The Star of Murrin was the key, its legend of seeing the future perhaps a metaphor for something more tangible. A smuggling ring, as Vaughan suggested, could explain the wealth and secrecy surrounding Ashby's circle. But Clara's death raised new questions. Had she been silenced for knowing too much, or was she part of the scheme? Poirot's cane tapped the ground as he walked back to the village. The ledger's mention of a cave intrigued him. The star's glow, the algae, the smuggling it all pointed to the cliffs, where the sea whispered its own secrets. He resolved to investigate, but not yet. The killer was watching, and Poirot would not tip his hand. The chapter closed with Poirot standing at the village square, the church bell tolling 3 times, an echo of the stopped clock. The puzzle was growing, each piece more intricate than the last. But Hercule Poirot, with his unerring logic, was undaunted. The star of Murrin's light would guide him, not to the future, but to the truth. Chapter 4. The Siren's Lullaby. The cliffs of St. Murrin's Vale stood sentinel over the restless sea, their jagged edges softened by the morning's thinning fog. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted against the wind, followed a winding path. To the shore, his cane sinking slightly into the damp earth. The murders of Lord Ashby, Lionel Gray, and Clara Thorne formed a constellation of clues, each pointing to the Star of Murrin. The ledger from Vaughan's shop, with its cryptic note about a star shipment and a cave, had set Poirot's little grey cells ablaze. The maid Leela's tearful confession in the church overhearing. Clara and Edmund Vane discussed the stars. Danger only deepened the mystery. Now the cliffs beckoned, whispered to buy local legends of a siren whose song lured sailors to their doom. Poirot's destination was the home of Old Tom, a weathered fisherman whose cottage perched precariously near the cliff's edge. The villagers spoke of him in hushed tones, claiming he'd seen the stars glow in the sea. Poirot knocked on the warped door, the scent of salt and fish oil greeting him as Tom appeared. His face was a map of wrinkles, his eyes sharp as a goals. "You're that detective," Tom grunted, leaning on a gnarled staff. "Heard you're sniffing around the star." "What's it to you?" Monsieur Poirot said, his voice smooth. "I seek only the truth. You have seen this star." "Of Murren, oui. A glow in the waters, perhaps." Tom's gaze flickered to the sea, then back. "I seen it. Night before Ashby died, a light, pulsing like a heartbeat, out by the cove. Thought it was the siren at first, but it weren't no song. It was wrong. Wrong how?" Poirot pressed, his mustache twitching. "Too steady, too cold," Tom said. "Like a signal. I've fished these waters 50 years, and that light ain't natural. It's tied to the star, mark my words." Poirot nodded, filing away the detail. A glowing signal in the sea matched the luminescent poison and the vial. In Vaughan's shop. He thanked Tom and descended a rocky path to the cove, where waves crashed against barnacle-crusted stones. The air was thick with spray, and Poirot's polished shoes slipped slightly, but his focus was unshaken. He scanned the shoreline, noting a narrow crevice in the cliff face, half hidden by seaweed. A cave, perhaps the one hinted at in Vaughan's ledger. Before he could investigate, a shout echoed from above. Constable Brant, his face flushed, scrambled down the path. "Monsieur Poirot, it's Lila, the maid. She's gone missing again." A lad saw her running toward the cliffs at dawn, crying something about the siren. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Vite, we must find her. She knows more than she has told." They searched the cove, the wind carrying the sea's mournful wail. Poirot's gaze caught on a shimmer in the shallows, a pearl, half buried in the sand, etched with a tiny star. He knelt, his gloved fingers retrieving it, when Brant's cry rang out. There, by the rocks, Leela lay crumpled in a shallow pool, her dress sodden, her hand clutching another starched pearl. Her face was serene, almost peaceful, but her chest was still drowned, though the water barely reached her knees. Poirot's heart sank, but his mind sharpened. The tide was low, the pool too shallow for accidental drowning. He examined her closely, noting no signs of struggle, only a faint bruise on her wrist and a trace of luminescent algae on her fingers. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "Another murder, staged as a tragedy. The killer grows bold." Brant's voice shook. "The siren's curse, sir. The village'll say she was lured to her death." "Nan," Poirot snapped. "This is no curse, but human cunning. The pearl, the algae, these are clues, not myths." He pocketed the pearl and instructed Brant to summon help. Alone, Poirot's gaze returned to the crevice. The cave called to him, but first he needed answers. Back at the village, he sought out the church organist, a frail woman named Mrs. Pembry, who was said to know every local tale. She sat at her organ, her fingers coaxing a haunting melody from the pipes. Madame Poirot began, "You know, the legend of the siren. Tell me, is there music tied to her tale?" Mrs. Pembry's hands paused. "Aye, an old lullaby. Fisherfolk sing it to calm the sea." "Why do you ask?" "A hunch," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Might you have a copy?" She produced a tattered sheet, the notes handwritten, the title "The Siren's Call." Poirot studied it, his mind racing. The melody's rhythm matched a sequence he'd found in Lila's locket, retrieved from her body by Brant. The locket, overlooked in her panic at the church, contained a tiny scroll with musical notation. Comparing it to Mrs. Pembry's sheet, Poirot saw the notes formed a pattern, a cipher. His fingers traced the bars, translating them into numbers. 47.3, 5.1. Coordinates. Magnifique, he whispered. A map hidden in music. The cave, it holds the star's secret. He thanked Mrs. Pembury and hurried to the manor, where Lady Celeste was overseeing preparations for a memorial service. Her silver gown was replaced by sombre black, but her eyes still held that unnerving calm. Poirot confronted her in the library, where portraits of Ashby ancestors glowered from the walls. Madame, he said, Lila is dead, drowned in a manor. Most unnatural. She carried a pearl marked with a star, and a locket with a cipher. You know of this, I think. Celeste's composure faltered, her hand brushing a locket at her own throat. Lila was a frightened girl, Monsieur Poirot. She spoke of sirens, of curses. I tried to calm her, but she was beyond reason. And yet, Poirot said, stepping closer, she knew of the star, as did your husband, Gray, and Clara. They were part of a society, one that guarded a secret tied to smuggling, 2 signals in the sea. Celeste's lips parted, but she recovered quickly. You weave fantasies, monsieur. I know nothing of such things. Poirot smiled thinly. The truth, it is no fantasy. It waits in a cave, and Hercule Poirot will find it. He left her, his mind fixed on the coordinates. That evening, he returned to the cove, a lantern in hand. The crevice was narrow, but he squeezed through, emerging into a damp cavern where the sea's echo was a low moan. His lantern caught glints of crystal embedded in the walls, their faint glow mirroring the algae's luminescence. At the cavern's heart was a wooden crate, its lid marked with a star. Inside he found ledgers, maps, and a single glowing crystal, the star of Marin, pulsing like a living thing. Poirot's breath caught. The ledgers detailed shipments of rare artifacts, smuggled through the cove under cover of the star's signals. Names appeared: Ashby, Gray, Clara, and others, including Vaughan. Lila's name was absent, but a note mentioned a society tasked with protecting the operation. The murders, Poirot realized, were not about the star's myth but its profit. As he prepared to leave, a shadow moved at the cave's entrance. Edmund Vane, his fox mask gone, stood with a knife, his eyes wild. You've gone too far, Poirot, he hissed. The stars, ours. Poirot's cane flashed, striking Vane's wrist. The knife clattered to the ground, and Brant, alerted by Poirot's earlier message, appeared with 2 constables. Vane was restrained, cursing, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere. The cave held answers, but the killer's motive was still veiled. Was Vane the mastermind, or a pawn? The chapter closed with Poirot emerging into the night, the star in his coat, its glow faint but unyielding. The siren's lullaby had led him here, but one final act remained. The truth, like the tide, was rising, and Hercule Poirot would meet it head-on. Chapter 5. The star's final gleam. The sea's restless murmur filled the night as Hercule Poirot stood at the mouth of the smuggler's cave, the star of Marin pulsing faintly in his gloved hand. The crystal, no larger than a walnut, cast an eerie glow, its bioluminescent light dancing across the damp cavern walls. The ledgers he'd found detailed a smuggling ring, with Lord Ashby, Lionel Gray, Clara Thorne, and others as key players. Lila's murder, staged as a siren's curse, was a chilling warning to those who threatened the operation. Edmund Vane, now in custody, had tried to silence Poirot, but his desperation suggested he was no mastermind. The The true architect of these crimes remained at large, and Poirot's little grey cells were alight with suspicion. Back at the Ashby estate, the manor was quiet, its grandeur dimmed by mourning. Poirot had summoned the surviving suspect's lady, Celeste, Elias Vaughan, and a handful of minor society members to the library, where the fire's glow cast long shadows. The star rested on a velvet cushion, its light a silent accusation. Poirot stood before the group, his cane tapping rhythmically, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice steady, "for murders have stained Saint Murren's Vale, Lord Ashby, Lionel Grey, Clara Thorne, and poor Leila. Each death, it was a thread in a tapestry of greed, woven around this." He gestured to the star of Murren, a crystal not of myth, but of profit, a signal for smugglers, guiding contraband through the cove's hidden caves. Lady Celeste, draped in black silk, raised an eyebrow. "A bold claim, Monsieur Poirot, but where is your proof?" Poirot smiled thinly. "The proof, madame, is in the details. The locked room where Lord Ashby died, the glowing poison that felled Grey, the blade in Vaughan's clock that took Clara, and the pearl in Leila's hand all point to a mind both cunning and theatrical. Let us unravel this, we." He paced, his cane clicking. First Ashby. His death in a locked room was no mystery. The key, found on his desk, was a duplicate. The real key was hidden in his cane, which held a note. "The star sees all." This was no warning, but a boast. The killer used a secret passage behind the study's bookshelf, known only to the family. "I found it this morning, its hinges oiled recently." Celeste's composure wavered, her fingers tightening on her locket. Poirot continued. "Grey's poison, laced with bioluminescent algae, was delivered in a champagne bottle marked with a star. The maid, Leila, poured it, but she was no killer, just a pawn, frightened by what she overheard. Clara, killed in Vaughan's clock, knew too much about the smuggling. Her death was meant to silence her, but the blade's mechanism was too precise for Vaughan's clumsy hands. Vaughan, pale and hunched, muttered, "I told you, I'm no murderer." "Nan," Poirot agreed, "but you are complicit. Your ledger named the society, a group guarding the star's secret. You crafted devices to signal ships, using the star's glow. But you were not the leader." He turned to Celeste, his gaze piercing. "Madame, you are the weaver of this web. Ashby wanted to end the smuggling, fearing exposure. Grey demanded a larger share. Clara threatened to reveal all to the authorities. Leila, overhearing your plans, became a liability. You killed them, each death a performance to protect your empire." Celeste laughed, a brittle sound. "Preposterous. I loved my husband. Why would I risk everything?" "Because," Madame Poirot said, "the star was your legacy. The ledgers name you as the society's head, using your charm to bind them. The musical cipher in Leila's locket, matching your own, led me to the cave. You orchestrated every move, even Vane's attack on me, to deflect suspicion." He produced her locket, taken from evidence. "This, it holds the same cipher. You taught Leila the melody, thinking her loyal, but her fear betrayed you." Celeste's face hardened. "You have no proof, only stories." Poirot gestured to the star. "The crystal itself accuses you. Its glow matches the algae and the poison found in your private greenhouse. I sent Constable Brant there this morning. He found vials hidden among your orchids." The room tensed as Celeste stood, her calm shattering. "You meddling fool," she hissed lunging for the star. Poirot was ready, his cane hooking her wrist. She stumbled, and Brant, waiting in the shadows, restrained her. The other society members gasped, their loyalty crumbling as Celeste's guilt was laid bare. "You thought to trap Hercule Poirot," he said, his voice cold. "But the truth, it is a mirror, reflecting all. You used the siren's legend to mask your crimes, staging Lila's death to fuel the myth. But no fog, no song, can hide from my little grey cells." As Celeste was led away, cursing, Poirot addressed the others. "The smuggling ring is finished. The star returns to the museum, its secrets exposed. Let this be a lesson: greed blinds, but justice sees." The next morning, Poirot stood on the cliffs, the sea calm beneath a clearing sky. The star was safe, the smugglers arrested, and the village free of its curse. He thought of Celeste, her ambition undone by her own arrogance, and of Lila, an innocent caught in a deadly game. The siren's lullaby was silent now, its melody replaced by the wind's soft sigh. Poirot adjusted his hat, his moustache curving with satisfaction. "C'est fini," he murmured. The star shines no more, and Hercule Poirot departs. He boarded the train, the village fading into the mist. The case was closed, its threads tied, leaving no shadow of mystery. St. Merin's veil would heal, and Poirot, ever the seeker of truth, looked to the next challenge, his heart light under the Cornish sun.